Yes.
Hello, everybody from around the world. This is the latest in the series of Coaching and Mentoring International webinars. On this time on the theme of making the case for a business case for a mentoring program. I'm David Clutterbuck, and I'm in the UK. I describe myself as a compulsive scribbler. I've been writing books on coaching and mentoring for the past nearly 40 years, and I'm one of the co-founders of the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. Coaching and Mentoring International is a global consortium or network of specialist organizations who provide services in the areas of coaching and mentoring, particularly the training of coaches and mentors and the development of programs of coaching and mentoring. With me is Angelos Derlopas, who's our representative in Athens, where I understand it's even hotter than it is here in the UK. We're sweltering on what to us is a heat wave of nearly 30 degrees. So I see some familiar names on the list there. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Angelos to tell you briefly a little bit more about himself and then to get started on the webinar. Angelos, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, David. Yes, I'll stay here in Athens, Greece, and currently we're in much hotter environment, 36 during midday. It's getting a little bit more cooler right now, but we're always in the air conditioning, which is a nice company. So David talked about the CMI, so I guess I don't have to do that. And he talked a bit about himself. But what is very, very, very impressive, at least for me, is that David has written more than 70 books so far, and he's a visiting professor to 4 universities. And just a few words about me. I am, as you may have guessed already, I'm working and operating here in Athens, Greece, and for the last 10 years, I focus in coaching and mentoring. So we have coaching and mentoring services and training as well. I have been until recently, until last year, the ICF Greece chapter president, and I'm currently serving as a subject matter expert in ICF Global Job Analysis Task Force. And my job here is to do what is best for people and to raise the standards here in Greece for coaching and mentoring. So I think that's enough for me, and we can start with the presentation. Okay, so the key elements of the business case, which we are going to discuss for the next 60 minutes, are strategic, the culture change, return on investment, communication, supporting key business issues, and corporate social responsibility. We will expand on all these fields right after in a few minutes. But first, let's just see who are we trying to convince. So we could say that, like all developmental interventions, making the case for investment in mentoring is not necessarily straightforward. The chain of cause and effect may be distorted, especially if the mentoring program is just one part of a larger initiative or even a package of initiatives. For example, as one of a number of support measures for promoting diversity or as part of a graduate induction program. Nonetheless, there are sufficient cases of very specific benefit from mentoring programs and relationships to produce a very strong case to all key audiences: top management, line managers, HR, potential mentors and mentees, and other stakeholders like the shareholders. For all of this, the two basic questions are: how do I know that the investment of time, energy, and/or money is worthwhile? And why do I need to invest in a formal support structure or relationship rather than just let mentoring happen naturally and informally?
Angelos, do you want to put the slides up? Move the slide.
So the slide is not showing.
So.
Okay, it seems I have a technical glitch. Okay. Okay, so we can move to the next slide, or unless you want to add something here, David.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. Carry on.
Good. Now,
You carry on.
the top management needs to know how mentoring will contribute to achieving the bottom line and the impact on supporting critical change, how mentoring links with other interventions such as coaching, training, agile teams, and how it will help them personally. For example, by keeping in touch with thinking at other levels in the organization, rehearsing difficult messages, etc. Now, mentoring can work in most organizations, regardless of size, culture, or market sector. It can communicate to employees far more fully the complexity of procedures and the unique nature of the company than any formal training course, induction booklets, or even company manual. Mentoring enhances the abilities of both the mentor and the mentee, so the organization gains through increased efficiency. Companies with formal, long-standing mentoring programs claim tangible increases in productivity and efficiency. Intangible benefits will include improved staff morale, greater career satisfaction, and swifter getting up to speed when mentored managers are inserted into a new job. Another significant impetus behind mentoring is the cost, not in cash terms exactly. Mentoring is not the cheap alternative when you take into account the value of management time, but in saving expensive offsite process, which take employees away from productivity and activities for weeks. Now, the primary rewards to a company of a mentoring program, you must remember that it is the easier recruitment and induction, the improved motivation, management of corporate culture, leadership development, succession planning, improved communication, and improved retention of employees. Can I move on? Can I move on?
Yeah, sure. Carry on. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the line manager. What do the line managers need to know? The three main questions is what's in it for me, how mentoring will reinforce their own efforts to develop talent in their teams, and how it will enable greater delegation. It is surprising how little attention is paid to the line manager as a stakeholder in the mentoring relationship, yet he or she can make it or break it. And all too often, line managers only see that the downsides of having a direct report mentored. For example, the mentee will be taking more time away from his or her work for mentoring meetings, and the question around their heads is, what are they saying about me? So the latter is really a valid concern. As a good working estimate, at least 90% of mentoring pairs spend some time discussing the mentee's relationship with his or her boss. This seems to hold broadly true at all levels, for new recruit at the lowest levels to chief executive. Line managers of mentees in effective mentoring schemes find the following benefits: the value of having a second opinion for someone independent who doesn't have a direct involvement in the mentee's work, improved self-awareness of the mentee, better relationships between the mentee and their peers and with the line manager, him or herself, and also greater clarity, a sense of purpose and direction on the part of the mentee. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think it's worth saying on the delegation issue that this is a really important one. We're finding that pretty much every line manager we talk to has got a big issue with trying to do too much with too little resources, and they're finding that they are totally stretched. And the one thing that they need to do, whether or not they have the skills to do it or not, is to delegate more. And so what we find happens is the conversation between the mentor and the mentee creates the opportunity to talk about how could you help your line manager be to get free of some of the responsibilities that they have, so that they can do things that are more valuable and more interesting to them. So actually, the big benefit we find is that line managers who are prepared to share some of their responsibilities with their mentee can make that an overt proposition, and the mentee can talk with their mentor about how they make that happen. And so it becomes a really good investment for the line manager in being able to get rid of some of those jobs that they don't really need to do. And of course, they then get a reputation also for developing their own people. What we don't want to see is line managers abdicating responsibility for development of their direct reports. But if it's done properly, the partnership between mentor and line manager, even though they probably never talk together, and indeed we would recommend they don't talk together about the development of the mentee, that partnership through the mentee has multiple benefits for the team.
Thank you, David. Now let's talk about what the HR needs to know. Now, first, there are two main things: how mentoring integrates and with other people's processes such as appraisal, coaching, training, action learning, and fast knowledge transfer. And how mentoring can contribute to key people issues such as retention, women returners, equal opportunities, and succession planning. David, would you like to talk about a little about fast knowledge transfer?
Yeah, this is a term which has taken off quite widely since we initiated it last year. What we mean by this is that lots of organisations have got what they might call mentoring light. In fact, an organisation I was talking to yesterday, that's exactly what it's called it. And it's not really mentoring at all. What it is an exchange of information. So it's going to put people together very briefly to somebody who's got a little bit of expertise on something with somebody who needs that expertise, and so there's an expertise exchange. Now, it's very good to have this kind of knowledge sharing in an organisation because it's basically it's very fast in response. You can get the information when you need it. All you need is subject expertise in this role. You don't need to have the skills of teaching or educating. And it's really a sort of one-night stand. We refer to it as Tinder for knowledge exchange. But it's not a relationship. It's not mentoring. And mentoring gives you so much more. It gives you two-way learning. So the mentor learns too. It focuses not just on the problem, but on the learning that the mentee can apply in other circumstances too. It offers self-knowledge as well as technical knowledge. Mentoring gives the mentee a role model to follow as well. And it leads to much deeper levels of change in the way that people think and behave, and so forth. So what we've basically got here is a much deeper, more powerful relationship with mentoring. It's not fast knowledge transfer, but fast knowledge transfer has a role to play in the general education of people in the organization.
Thank you very much, David. And we have been discussing very extensively in the morning, and I can see that because FKT is a big issue here in Greece, but I don't see there are people from Greece attending. So I think we could move on to the next subject, unless, okay, we will have a Q&A session in the end, so everybody will, that have an interest in discussing more about FKT, we will have the opportunity to do so. Now, to expand on the slide itself, besides FKT, I'd like to comment that the assumption that the entire HR community will be actively supportive of mentoring is seductive, but it is often wrong. HR business partners, for example, have a great many pressures on them, and it's not unusual for some to resist the introduction of mentoring because it's one more responsibility they just have to take on. It's important to engage with the HR community generally at an early stage of planning and to have a continuing dialogue with them about how each mentoring initiative will support other priorities they have. Creating a mentoring program within HR itself can be a practical way of developing their appreciation of mentoring as an important part of their toolkit. The highly effective mentoring programs for HR people is delivering substantial learning for at least 95% of the mentees and at least 80% of the mentors. The mentoring programs can lead to at least 1/3 higher retention amongst people mentored than peers who are not. They demonstrate measurable improvements in mentee job commitment, engagement, and relationships at work, particularly with their bosses. They improve and reinforce mentors' confidence and ability in coaching their own direct reports, provide useful insights into people management undercurrents, broader issues that can lead to improvements in HR policies and processes. It gives leaders a greater confidence in succession plans. In the context of diversity management, it has a clear and substantial contribution towards the achievement of equal opportunity the targets and have a measurable impact on cultural awareness. Now, the experience of a wide range of international organizations indicates that getting right the balance between quality, the quality as measured by outcomes and by overall value for money, and local adaptation requires the following steps. One, understand and acknowledge what is there already. Two, reaffirm the business case and role for mentoring. Three, create a clear template for mentoring programs. Four, create a flexible but robust training program for mentors and mentees. Five, develop and support a training resource and a program management resource with a real understanding of mentoring. Six, provide continuing support for participants and programs. Seven, monitoring and evaluating program quality. And finally, eight, sharing learning and experiences. Can we move on to the next slide?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. So potential mentees, what do they need to know? What do they want to know? They want to know what effort they will have to put in to get full value from mentoring, and what are the risks, if there are any risks, what outcomes they can expect in career, learning, enabling, and emotional, and what is the benefit of mentoring to the company. Amongst the most common benefits we find across groups are obtaining opportunities to network and advice on how to grow their own networks, having someone sympathetic who will understand difficult situations and help them work their way through them, someone to believe in them and their abilities, help to work out what they want from their life and work, and how to make the appropriate choices and even sacrifices, and help in developing greater confidence, working through tactics to manage relationships with other people, becoming more comfortable in dealing with people from unfamiliar backgrounds, making sense of feedback from other sources, putting it into context and deciding how to deal with it, and being given an opportunity to challenge the organization's thinking and be challenged in one's own.
I just want to pick up on one thing here about the benefit to the company.
Yes.
Why should mentees want to be interested in the benefit to the company? It seems that that they want to have a connection with their objectives and what they want to get out of it, and what the company wants to get out of it. In the research that we've undertaken, we found a correlation, quite a strong correlation, between the success of the relationship from both mentors and mentees' perspective, and their sense that the organization is really behind it and supporting it. Now, we don't fully understand why this should be, but it's a phenomenon that we should take advantage of.
Thank you, David. So, moving on, what do potential mentors want to know? Again, what's in it for me? What are the risks, if any? And what's the benefit to the company? The same questions come again. So all the surveys and reviews that have been conducted in recent years to evaluate the outcomes of mentoring programs have indicated that the most frequent and most powerful benefits for mentors are the learning they take from the experience, both in having to explain intuitive reasoning and in listening to a different perspective. For example, problems mentees have with their bosses that often cause mentors to reflect on similar issues their direct reports may have with them. The opportunity to take reflective space in a hectic daily schedule, the satisfaction of knowing that they have made a difference to someone else, the intellectual challenge of working on issues for which they do not have to take this challenge, the personal responsibility that they may take into unfamiliar territory, and the increased skills base and the reputation that they build for themselves. Would you like to comment or add something here, David, or should we move on?
Let's move on to the next one.
Okay, I think we
need to move.
Okay,
yeah.
Yes, with a time schedule.
Actually,
Now,
let's just say one. Yeah.
okay.
Go on. Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
Should I go back? Would you like to?
I was just, yeah, let's just go back for a second. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we found amongst the mentors have really appreciated is really getting to know talent at other levels in the organization. And the value of being able to have conversations which are very strong personal and private conversations with people in a safe environment gives them all sorts of insights into what's actually going on lower down in the organization. It's about having friends in low places to tell you the truth. The things that the managers in between tend to try and avoid you finding out. If you're a senior manager, you find that when you've got these mentoring relationships, you get a closer idea of what people are really thinking at more junior levels, and that can be very helpful for you in terms of strategic planning, for example, and knowing how change is actually hitting the organization. So yeah, let's move on from there.
Yeah, thank you, David. So the strategic case here is mentoring introduces employees to strategic thinking at an early stage of their career. And as businesses rely increasingly on attracting talent, having a good mentoring program is a significant influencer on people's choices of employer. Mentoring creates opportunities to test out strategy in confidence on people close to the action, and reputation as an employer that believes in growing its people. If you aren't using mentoring widely, it is not very credible. David,
Yeah.
would you like to add something here?
I think there's something here about the social responsibility area that we're going to look at in the future. But we certainly found that if you have a reputation as somebody that there's an organisation that with a good mentoring program, you find that you can start applying that to all sorts of other activities within the community. And we find that the employers use mentoring as a means of building links with people in prisons, in schools, in government. It's amazing how widely you can use the mentoring competence that you have. And you know, by and large, one of the things that we do in a number of organizations we've seen is something called a shadow top team. And the shadow top team is composed of young people in the organization who, and you have the same number as on the normal top team, they get all the documents that the real top team gets, but a few days ahead. And they are mentored by a different member of the team, who then they have a meeting and they consider what would we decide was the right thing to do on the issues that are presented here. And this is a great way to educate them and to grow them, but it's also a great way for people at the top to understand how strategy is coming across, how it makes sense to people at lower levels. And of course, if the strategy is only making sense to you at the top, you've got a problem organizationally in implementing it. So this is a really valuable approach.
Thank you, David. Now, let's move on to the next one, the culture change. Now, mentoring creates the foundations for a coaching culture. Line managers use mentoring as somewhere safe to practice developmental behaviors. Role modeling new and desirable behaviors helps to make them safe and embed them. And it's a safe place to challenge where the organization fails to live up to its espoused values. Almost every mentoring program has a part of its objectives passing on the nuances of the corporate culture. Instead of preserving cultures, companies are these days desperately trying to change them. And this poses a number of problems, not least that it makes it even more difficult to identify mentors with the right values. Mentor and mentee in an effective developmental relationship are able to explore the differences between espoused corporate values and their actual behavior. And at the same time, the mentor helps to clarify in the mentee's mind which aspects of the culture are fixed, are not open to challenge, and which are open for dialogue. At one of the world's largest and most successful merchant banks, for example, new recruits soon learn that mere obsessive honesty is an immutable part of the future, but that maintaining a work-life balance on a par with integrity in the corporate value statement, that is honored more often in the breach. The mentee is able to use the mentor as a role model for selected aspects of the culture, while the mentor is able to use the mentee's constructive challenge to inform the continuing senior level debate on how the culture should evolve. Now, bringing mentors together from time to time to continue their skills development and review relationship progress within the bounds of confidentiality, of course, that has been proven to be valuable in changing how the organization tackles important issues relating to the culture. Establishing mentoring relationships helps build trust and can also overcome cultural differences and helps a number of organizations to cultivate a culture strongly supportive of individual and team excellence. Improve leadership skills in mentors and growing confidence, competence in engagement in mentees.
I think it's
makes
worth
people,
also.
yeah.
No, carry on, and I'll carry on after you, after Angelos.
No, I was just finishing that. It also makes people better skilled and more self-aware, and it's positively impacting the organizational performance.
Great, thank you. A couple of examples of this. One example is a large manufacturing organization that has sent everybody away in the top 200 to one of the big business schools to learn about customer relationship management, because it wanted to change from a sales culture to a CRM culture. And this was a difficult thing because most of the people in the top 200 simply didn't have the mindset. They didn't know how to put this new learning and these new ideas into practice. And so the mentoring was between members of in the top 200, and it didn't have to be somebody more senior. It was just another executive you could work with, helping them to really understand how they could apply this in their day-to-day work and operations. Another example is one that I'm currently involved with and getting intriguingly interested with, is to do with agile teams and scrum teams. Now, these tend to have a member of the team or have attached to the team a coach to help them with their progress. But by and large, most of these people don't know how to coach. They're just there to advise and tell. So giving them a mentor to help them work through how they actually make this role work. So that seems to be a very valuable thing to do. And the mentor would tend to be somebody who has previous experience in that very complex and fast-moving environment of an effective Scrum team.
Okay, so let's move on to the ROI, return on investment. And what about it? We say that minimum 1/3 higher retention of mentees versus non-mentored colleagues, and salespeople sell 20% more in first year. Maternity mentoring increases proportion who do return and reduces time it takes for them to get back to speed. And in the world of business and employment, it is possible to calculate approximate returns in respect of, for example, volume of sales by mentees versus unmentored counterparts. And it's worth noting that many measures need only be done once or at long intervals. Once a credible ratio is identified, it can also be applied over a number of years. And the most common measurements relate to retention. First, what we can do is to establish the turnover among people who are part of a mentoring relationship for both mentors and mentees, and among the peer group who are not. A minimum sample size of 12 is needed in each group. And typical ranges may be between 10% and 40% higher retention rate among the mentees. Now, if we establish as best as we can the following, we have to bear in mind that the numbers may vary considerably with job role and hierarchical level. Now, the things we should bear in mind is the cost of recruiting and perhaps training a replacement, the losses from the hiatus between departure of the employee and when the replacement becomes fully operational. For example, there may be several months with no one in the role, and even when the newcomer starts, they may need several more months before they are contributing at full strength. Typical losses in this case include work not done and loss of customers. And last but not least, there are the systemic losses, the impact on the work of other departments and even functions. David, back to you.
I think that covers it pretty much, Angelos. Let's move on to the next one.
Let's talk about the communication. The increased communication with mentoring it increases communication between hierarchical levels, between generations, field and headquarters, functions, and cultures. It brings cross-cultural awareness and collaboration. In a traditional senior to junior mentoring relationship, the mentee's unique position in the organization can aid informal communications because he or she straddles several levels. For example, through the relationship with a mentor, the junior management mentee has access to and is accepted by middle management. At the same time, he or she is accepted in the lower managerial levels. Since the mentee is familiar with the language and mannerisms of both, he or she can efficiently communicate each group's ideas and opinions to the other. Rich informal communication networks improve productivity and efficiency in a company since they lead to more action, more innovation, more learning, and swifter adjustments to changing business needs. It can be lonely at the top, as they say. The chance to pass information to lower levels of management restores interdependence between management levels and eases the flow of ideas and information. This special communication network also facilitates easier working of other areas of management development. Any comments or additions, David, here?
Just to say that in the cross-cultural area, we're going to talk in a moment about diversity. But one of the things we found really helpful is to link very senior people mentoring. So the junior person actually becomes the mentor to the more senior person, helping them to understand what the world looks like through the eyes of somebody from a different cultural background. Now, it can be, in some ways, all mentoring relationships are two-way anyway, or two-way learning processes. But it just emphasizes that the need for the more senior person to learn if you make it a reverse mentoring relationship. I think we've seen a lot more understanding of different cultures as a result of having really good mentoring programs in place. It's strange enough, even between subgroups within an organization. In one organization recently, we had there was a diversity mentoring program that was that included people from both the gay community and from both men and women. And the interesting thing was they had seen themselves as different communities, and they had excuse me, but they had not really had any communication between those two different communities. Actually, bringing them together in the mentoring program enabled them to have much more a much greater level of appreciation of each other's perspective. And of course, a typical outsider would say, well, they're all one community, but they weren't until they started to actually engage together in the mentoring program.
Thank you very much, David. I know that you will have a lot to say in the next slide regarding how do we support key business issues, diversity and equal opportunities. Mentoring new members of project teams speeds up to performing, storming, norming to performing. And coaches of agile teams can also benefit from mentoring.
I think we've covered a lot of this already. I do think that what we are seeing is that if you want to make a difference in terms of getting more people into senior levels in organizations from more women, more people from other ethnic backgrounds, different cultures, the only thing that seems to work extensively is mentoring. Now, when we talk about this, we are talking about proper mentoring. We are not talking about mentoring that's confused with sponsorship. It's simple mentoring plus, wherever possible, a range of other things that help people to get noticed. We've found it quite useful recently to make the distinction between this vexed issue of sponsorship, which is something which is not compatible with mentoring. It requires, it actually disempowers women more than in many ways. And having career champions. In a sponsorship relationship, you've basically got a lot of power plays going on. You're looking for the other person to use their authority and do things for you. If you have a network of career champions, these are people who open up opportunities for you, but ensure that you are responsible for how you respond to those opportunities. I think that's much more valuable than having a sponsor. So a mixture of mentoring and the development of a network of career champions. That seems to be what's really making a difference in diversity in equal opportunities at the moment.
Okay, thank you, David. Sometimes the sound breaks, so I'm not sure. So the next one is about the CSR. So we'll talk about the corporate social responsibility. And we have to bear in mind that mentoring helps building relationships with current and future customers in the community. With mentoring students can cut the cost of hiring and raises the quality of graduate intakes. And there's another very big issue here is ethical mentoring prevents damaging whistleblowing. And I know that you want to comment on this ethical mentoring issue as well, David.
Yeah, ethical mentoring. We now have a cadre of 150 ethical mentors in the National Health Service and others in other organisations too. But the NHS in the UK has the largest volume that we've encountered anywhere. And these are people who have the skills of mentors, but also have an understanding of the psychology of ethicality. And their role is to help people to think through: have I got an issue that needs to be made public? If I do, what's the best way to do this that doesn't damage the person's career or damage the organisation? When in both cases that would be unhelpful. And so, to helping them to find the right way through this terribly difficult pathway of when you think something is wrong and needs to be addressed. But nobody will listen to you. How do you actually go about bringing change about in a way that isn't damaging? It is quite possible, and indeed, it was relatively easy to do once you know the ways to do it. And one of the critical things we find is that ethical mentors, they link people together who've got similar issues, and suddenly, when you feel all alone on an issue that's not about something that's not right, and you find there are other people who share that view, view, suddenly you more and feel more confident in doing things because you know that you aren't alone. Let's move on.
Okay, now let's talk about how the way to maximize the ROI of mentoring is focused on program management itself. We don't have to stint on training and support. We need to get the right balance between formal and informal mentoring. We need not to confuse mentoring with fast knowledge transfer. And thanks to your earlier comment, I think we now know how to not confuse FKT with mentoring, or at least I hope so. We need also to measure the impact for mentees, mentors, and against the business objective, and link mentoring with other significant business initiatives, such as team coaching, for example. And again, here, do you want to add something?
I think we've largely covered a lot of this. But I think the last one, linking it with the business objectives. What are you trying to, or business initiative? What are you trying to do here? And team coaching is just an example. We know that team coaching is becoming more and more popular in organisations. But if you're trying to make that an internal activity, having the team coach, your internal team coaches, for them to have somebody to go to talk about their experience in this very tough role, really helps them to feel more valued, and have greater self-belief, self-confidence in being able to do it. I think this issue of formal and informal is important too. What tends to happen is if we just start with informal mentoring, it doesn't tend to develop a momentum. if you have enough formal mentoring going on where people know what they're doing, you get to a point, there's a tipping point where informal mentoring begins to flourish on the top of it. And the informal mentoring, because the people in doing it know what they're doing and have been educated in mentoring, that enables them to do it properly and well, so it's positive for the organization, not damaging to the organization. So formal first, and allow that to grow into informal.
Thank you, David. Now, some key questions for those who are still wondering on whether they should or should not apply or deploy a mentoring program in the organization. Its first critical question is, what is the cost of losing talent each year? The second one, what would be the savings and business impact of retaining our or their most talented people for an extra 12 months, for example, on average? What would our ExCo members learn from listening to younger generations? And what is the cost to the company from failure to achieve full gender, racial, and cultural equality? I think these are some good questions to see which are these costs. All right, David?
These are just some of the basic questions we might ask, and we look at other measures, other key questions relating to to the purpose of the program. So if the purpose of the program is, for example, to bring about an improvement in performance across a junior management level, for example, how would you measure that once you've identified how you'd measure an improvement in performance? Perhaps through 360 feedback, you can actually get to apply some costings to that too. So what is the benefit of that from a cost benefit point of view? Most of while everything can't be reduced to a cost benefit analysis, there's usually some approximation to look at when you start to do some clear understanding of the benefits of doing things or the costs of not doing things. And then you can look at what is the contribution that mentoring makes to those.
Exactly. Now, let's look at what is the cost for a mentoring pilot. Now, we say that design, training, the ongoing support, monitoring and measurement, and also the mentoring platform we need to build or provide, and the online information resources from 1 year typically ranges from 12,000 to 15,000 euros. And would you like to speak more about this, David?
Yeah, but I mean, very briefly, these are, it's very difficult to estimate exactly what an individual program would be. But if you're talking here, in this case, we're talking about a small pilot of maybe 12, maximum 20 mentoring pairs, you can get a pretty good idea of how well it's going to work in the organization. And I think to get the best cost benefit, it is important to do a pilot so you see what works and what doesn't work. And so these would be the mentoring platform would be a very simple mentoring platform, whereas if you're going for a much bigger program, you would want something that's more complex. So, but this would be a minimum cost. And if you're talking about sort of 15 mentors and 15 mentees, it's not a big cost per head to implement this.
Exactly. Now, let's see some other figures. What's the cost for a global mentoring capability, including internal training team, the online platform, the online information resources, and the accreditation to the international standards for mentoring and coaching programs, the ISMCP, that typically has a 60,000 euros initial outlay and 12,000 ongoing costs. And we should also say that it should be soon possible to accredit any internal mentors who wish to be recognized formally through the ISMCP. Now, the cost for that is unknown yet, but we probably be around 100 euros each.
The background to this is the MCC has been looking at what do organizations who have mentoring programs need to support their mentoring program, to support their mentors. And it turns out that their organizations are repeatedly saying, look, some of our mentors would like a recognition of their competence. So how can we do this in a practical way? And so this would something called the European Individual Award that comes through the EMCC, which basically could currently is awarded centrally by trained assessors, but increasingly EMCC is looking at the training of internal assessors, and in fact there are some examples of this happening already, where those assessors can provide people within the company with formal accreditation on a well-validated process. So I think that's something to look forward to for some people who want it. Not every mentor wants to be recognized in this way, but we find that there is an increasing proportion who do, and particularly actually people who see that when they retire, this might be a skill that they want to use as part of their portfolio of activities. So I think we've pretty much come to the end of the slides.
Yes, you're right. We're right on time. Yes, so we have. Yes, go on, David. Sorry.
No, I was going to say let's open it up for any questions, which can go into the questions box or the chat box, or simply unmute yourself.
We did not have enough time in the morning session for questions, and we had some technical problems. But now we have 12 minutes to answer any questions.
So pop something in the.
Yes. I don't see anything in the chat box. Anyone who has a question can.
Okay, we've unmuted it. I've unmuted everybody, so you can speak up. No. Okay, so we have nothing in the questions, nothing in the chat. That's okay. Well, I suggest then that look, I think we are all unmuted. Let's then in that case, I think we will say thank you for everybody for attending. Hope you found it useful. And we will be launching a new series of these webinars in the autumn. Thank you, and thank you to Angelos. So everybody have a good evening or morning, wherever you are. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.
Goodbye.